one of the things we're going to get into are specific examples of investment property, property that is iconic. So one of the things that's helpful whenever we're trying to look at what are the opportunities in retrofits, what are the opportunities in new building development, is to have some of the structures be structures that have some high visibility around the world. And so let's just take, for example, the Empire State Building. And I think our next speaker can talk about a retrofit of that project, some of the financing and some of the opportunities associated with that. And I should, as a little plug for the good work they have done at the Empire State Building, let you know that they have, in a very transparent way, made available to the public a lot of their assumptions about what investments they made and what kinds of payoffs they had. So I'm going to introduce now Dan Probst, who's with Jones Lang LaSalle. Jones Lang LaSalle is one of a small handful of global real estate services firms, financial and real estate services, that is recognized around the world. Dan is their chair of their Global Environmental Sustainability Board. And I should say very briefly that such things as global sustainability boards is one of the things that even makes responsible property investing a real thing, because you suddenly have CEO level attention to these kinds of issues. And whereas in the past, I remember talking to CEOs who did very well, their buildings would get remarkable awards, and they would say, yeah, there's some guy, my energy guy, gets these awards, and it's great. I'm not even sure who he is. You know, he probably has his name on his shirt. You know, they get this CEO that is just not connected to the sustainability stuff, and that's very, very different now and provides a real opportunity. And for someone like Dan, it means that he's advising very senior people within his own organization, but then also throughout the world. So Dan, tell us what's important to know about a variety of things, including the Empire State Building.
Chuck talked a little bit about the opportunity in the existing building market, and that's really, I think, this is an example of what you can do with an older, in this case, a 1930s existing building that at the end of this project, we're targeting LEED Gold and is already, through the work that we've been doing, achieved an ENERGY STAR score of 90. So a very old building designed and built, before air conditioning is now really an industry-leading green building. The industry existing building opportunity is one, again, that Chuck talked about. The fact of the matter is we all talk about goals and, by certain years in the energy reduction that we want to achieve in buildings. And if you think about it, I mean, we're not building very many new buildings today, and a lot of the early focus with respect to green buildings was on designing and building new green buildings. But 85 to 90% of the buildings that'll be around in the year 2020 exist already today. And in our industry, the Cash for Clunkers program doesn't work. We can't just replace these old buildings with new, more efficient buildings. So doing things like we're doing at the Empire State Building, and again, the owner wanted to do this in a very public way and share the learning so that they could be transferred to other existing buildings. If you can read this, just a few statistics about the Empire State Building. Notably, it's a great tourist attraction. But in recent years, it hadn't been necessarily a great tenant attraction, and it was just sort of average in terms of energy performance. So the owner was embarking on a repositioning of the building anyway and looking at redeveloping the building. It's in a great location in terms of Midtown Manhattan, close to public transportation, but really needed a facelift. And so they were headed down that path when they suddenly realized they also had a great opportunity to focus on the energy systems in the building as well. And that's what launched really sort of a separate and distinct energy project for the building. Tony Malkin, who's the owner, had a lot of motivations, again, in terms of repositioning the building, but has become, really a voice for our industry with respect to existing buildings and the things that you can do, and an advocate here in Washington for legislation So he's very motivated, again, to have this be an example to others. And that as the last line says, if the only place we succeed is the Empire State Building, then the effort is a failure. So again, he was wanting to do this and do it through a process that could be replicable. I thought it'd be good just to step back for a second. So that was a little bit about Tony's motivation in embarking on this project. But from our perspective, when we look at a lot of other owners and what they're doing, and Chuck kind of talked about this, 4 or 5 years ago, it was a discussion about global warming and climate change and corporate social responsibility. But the conversation has really moved well beyond that at this point. And owners and the industry really focusing and recognizing that this is just good business. And it's good business because corporations who are the tenants in these buildings care about this topic. They care about it because they want reduced operating expenses and lower energy, but they care also because their employees care, their customers care, and their shareholders care. And a lot of studies about attracting new employees to the workforce, and they want to work for a company that's environmentally progressive. A lot of companies are screening in their supply chain the other companies they do business with and want to know that they're doing business with companies that are being progressive with respect to their environmental programs. And the kind of offices that they occupy and the way they build out those offices can be a shining example of that. So it's just good business, and I think that's going to be a key market driver going forward. Back to the Empire State Building, the other thing that was clear from the start in terms of the perspective on that, there's a lot of things you can do to kind of green up a building in terms of operating practices, green cleaning, green landscaping, and so on and so forth. But Tony is also a businessman and wanted to really focus on the energy systems in the building and recognize that there was a lot of work that we could do that would have a financial return and a payback. And so that was much of the focus of the design team that came together to design the retrofits for the building. The other thing about that is this notion of the replicable model, and you heard a little bit about it in the prior panel in terms of this integrated design process. And so we went through a very rigorous design process, created an energy model of the building. The team involved came up with over 60 ideas about things that could be done to improve the energy performance of the building. And they were everything from a vertical axis wind turbine around the antenna at the top to using the river that flows underneath Manhattan and underneath the building as a heat source and heat sink. But at the end of the day, we looked at all different combinations and packages of energy reduction opportunities in the building in a very holistic way that also looked at the envelope of the building as well as the loads in the building and so forth. And I think what's interesting, and I'll hit the highlights, but what came out the other end were 8 projects going forward, and some of those they're not real high-tech, real advanced projects. They're pretty fundamental things that you might think about doing to your home. So I think that was an interesting outcome of the process. Part of the process was picking sort of the optimized place in terms of payback, return on investment on the one axis, and carbon reduction on the other. And we could have continued to spend more money and achieve a little bit more carbon, but you can see there's sort of an inflection point on the curve that just made sense in terms of optimizing, again, the mix of projects that ended up being part of the final project. The other thing that was interesting is that on the left are the energy savings associated with sort of what we would call base building projects, so upgrading the chiller plant and things like that. On the right-hand side are the energy savings associated with doing things in the tenant spaces, and as you can see, that's much larger. So one of the issues that we often see in our industry is that when companies go in and do an energy audit of the building and looking for opportunities for improvement, they're often very just focused on the base building opportunities and ignoring opportunities to do things in the tenant spaces. So these are the 8 projects. Here are the first 4. They're retrofitting all the windows in the building. All 6,500 windows are being taken out, a reflective film put in, and a gas, argon gas injected in between the panes and then put back. So retrofitting, they're all being done on site. We're essentially creating a window factory on site so we don't have shipping and carbon associated with shipping to go off site and back on, and we're able to reuse the existing glass. While they're at it, we discovered that the existing perimeter radiation was, there was no insulation behind it, just a brick wall and just about as much heat going into New York City as was coming into the building. So they're adding insulation. Again, pretty fundamental things. And then in the tenant spaces, better use of daylighting, dimmable ballasts in response to outdoor light and controls to control some of the plug loads in the space. Replacing the air handlers with variable frequency drives, again, pretty fundamental. A chiller plant retrofit, a quick thing about that is that the original redevelopment project that they were looking at, because historically the building was a lot of very, very small tenants. You think of even a lot of spaces that were eye doctors and with corridors on the floor. Now they're moving more toward and attracting Class A tenants into the building when they're opening up all the floors. So the corridors are coming down, and they're having to actually condition more space than was originally conditioned, and they were going to have to add capacity to the central plant. But by doing the other things we're doing, like reduced lighting loads and reduced loads through the skin of the building, we were able to retain and work within the capacity of the existing central plant and just upgrade the plant. Upgrading the automation system, adding some ventilation control, and then adding some energy management systems into the tenant space where they can actually have better real-time readout of their energy use and monitor and control their own consumption. So those were the 8 projects. A lot more about it at esbsustainability.com. You can see all the details about the projects that were considered and the process that the team went through to embark on the overall project. So that's the Empire State Building story quickly.